The Journey to Mastering Emotions, A Path to Inner Peace. Once upon a time, in a village nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a young man named Aaron. He was known throughout the village not for any great feats of strength or wisdom, but for his struggle with anger. The slightest inconvenience, be it a delay in the market or a wrong look from a neighbor, could ignite his temper. His fits of rage would leave him exhausted, his relationships strained, and his mind clouded with regret. Aaron had not always been this way. In his youth, he was known as a cheerful and gentle soul, always eager to lend a hand or share a laugh. But life, with its twists and turns, had changed him. The death of his parents in a tragic accident when he was still a boy left him feeling abandoned and helpless. The grief he carried slowly transformed into a deep-seated anger toward the world and, ultimately, himself. As the years passed, Aaron found it harder and harder to control his emotions. His anger, once sparked by the pain of his loss, had grown into something much more dangerous, an uncontrollable force that seemed to govern his every action. His friends began to distance themselves, not wanting to be caught in the storm of his outbursts. The villagers, though polite, whispered behind his back, calling him the Man of Fire because of his unpredictable temper. One evening, after yet another argument with a neighbor over a trivial matter, Aaron returned to his small cottage at the edge of the village, feeling utterly defeated. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. Inside, the silence of his home only amplified the chaos in his mind. He stared at the wooden walls, the flickering candlelight doing little to soothe his racing thoughts. "I cannot continue like this," he muttered to himself. "I'm losing everything." Determined to find a solution, Aaron recalled stories he had heard as a child. Stories of a wise sage named Surya, who lived in the mountains far to the north. It was said that Surya had once been a warrior, renowned for his fierce battles, but had given up violence and anger to pursue a life of peace and wisdom. Those who sought his counsel would leave transformed, their hearts lighter and their minds clearer. Without a second thought, Aaron decided to embark on a journey to find Surya. The next morning, with nothing but a small bag of provisions and a sturdy walking stick, he set off toward the distant mountains. The road was long and arduous, stretching through dense forests, across wide rivers, and up steep hills. Days turned into weeks, and the solitude of the journey gave Aaron much time to reflect on his life. There were moments when he questioned whether the journey was worth it, whether someone like him could truly change. But the thought of returning to his old life, a life of anger and regret, pushed him forward. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of travel, Aaron reached the base of the mountains. The sun was beginning to set, and in the distance he could see the outline of a small hut perched high on a cliff, its light flickering like a beacon in the growing darkness. He knew, instinctively, that this was where Surya lived. With renewed energy, Aaron climbed the narrow, winding path that led to the hut. The air grew colder as he ascended, and by the time he reached the top, his breath came out in visible puffs. The door to the hut was slightly ajar, and from within came the soft crackling of a fire. Aaron hesitated for a moment before knocking gently on the door. A voice, calm and steady, called from inside, "Enter." Pushing the door open, Aaron stepped into the warm glow of the room. The walls were lined with shelves filled with scrolls and books, and in the center sat an elderly man with long silver hair, his posture straight and his eyes bright despite his age. This was Surya. "I have been expecting you," the sage said, his voice carrying a tone of knowing kindness. Aaron, though surprised by the greeting, bowed respectfully and sat down across from Surya. "I have come seeking your help," Aaron began. "I cannot control my anger. It destroys my peace, my relationships, and my happiness. I do not want to live this way anymore, but I do not know how to change." Surya nodded, his eyes never leaving Aaron's. "Anger is a powerful emotion," he said. "It can burn through you like fire, consuming everything in its path if left unchecked. But it is also a natural part of being human. The goal is not to eliminate anger, but to understand it and to learn how to master it rather than be mastered by it." Aaron listened intently, feeling a spark of hope within him. "How do I begin?" he asked. Surya smiled gently. "The journey to mastering your emotions is not an easy one, but it is one that begins within. You must first learn to observe your anger without letting it control you. You must become the watcher of your thoughts and emotions, rather than their servant. Over the next few days, Surya taught Aaron the practice of mindfulness, the art of being fully present in the moment and observing one's thoughts and feelings without judgment. At first, it seemed impossible. Aaron's mind was like a raging river, constantly swept up in the current of his emotions. But under Surya's guidance, he began to practice daily meditation, sitting in silence and focusing on his breath, allowing his thoughts and emotions to rise and fall like waves without being carried away by them. The first few weeks were incredibly challenging. Each time Aaron tried to focus on his breath, his mind would wander to the memories that haunted him. The loss of his parents, the fights he had with friends, the burning anger that always seemed just beneath the surface. But Surya encouraged him to be patient, to allow himself the space to feel these emotions without reacting to them. "Your anger is like a storm," Surya said one afternoon as they sat outside, watching the clouds roll in over the mountains. "It feels powerful and uncontrollable when you're in the midst of it. But like all storms, it will pass if you do not feed it. The key is to anchor yourself, to become the still point in the center of the storm." Aaron nodded, though he still struggled to understand how he could remain calm in the face of such overwhelming emotions. One day, Surya gave Aaron a simple task. He handed him a glass jar filled with water and a handful of dirt. "Shake the jar," Surya instructed. Aaron did as he was told, shaking the jar vigorously until the water became murky and clouded with dirt. "Now," Surya said, "set the jar down and watch." Aaron placed the jar on the ground and watched as slowly the dirt began to settle at the bottom, leaving the water clear once again. "Your mind is like this jar of water," Surya explained. "When you are agitated by anger or fear, your thoughts become muddled and unclear. But if you allow yourself to be still, your mind will eventually settle, and you will see things as they truly are." This simple lesson resonated deeply with Aaron. Over time, he began to apply it to his own life. Whenever he felt the stirrings of anger, instead of reacting immediately, he would take a deep breath and give himself a moment to pause. Sometimes, he would still feel the rush of emotion, but by allowing it to settle, he found that he could respond to situations with greater clarity and understanding. Months passed, and Aaron continued to practice mindfulness and meditation under Surya's guidance. He spent hours each day in quiet reflection, learning to observe his emotions with curiosity rather than judgment. Slowly but surely, he began to notice changes within himself. The outbursts of anger that had once been so frequent became less common, and when they did arise, they were shorter and less intense. But the real test came when Aaron decided it was time to return to his village. Surya, sensing his readiness, gave him a final piece of advice before he left. "Remember, the journey of mastering your emotions is lifelong. There will be moments when you falter, but do not be discouraged. Each moment of awareness is a step toward peace." Aaron thanked the sage and began the long journey home. As he walked the familiar paths through the forest and over the hills, he felt a sense of calm that he had never known before. The landscape, though unchanged, seemed more vibrant and alive. It was as if the peace he had cultivated within himself had transformed the world around him. When he finally arrived at the village, the familiar sights and sounds greeted him. He expected to feel the old stirrings of anger as he saw the faces of those he had once quarreled with. But instead, he felt a deep sense of compassion. He realized that the villagers, like him, were doing the best they could with the challenges life had given them. One afternoon, not long after his return, Aaron found himself in the marketplace. The bustle of people and the clamor of voices reminded him of the many times he had lost his temper in this very spot. As he stood in line to buy some bread, a man accidentally bumped into him, spilling a small basket of fruit onto the ground. In the past, such an incident would have triggered an outburst of frustration, but this time, Aaron simply smiled and helped the man gather his fruit. "It's all right," Aaron said, his voice calm and steady. "No harm done." The man looked at him with surprise, clearly expecting a different reaction. But Aaron felt no need to explain. He had learned that true strength lay not in controlling others or the world around him, but in mastering himself. As the sun began to set over the village that evening, Aaron stood at the edge of the river, watching the water flow peacefully by. He took a deep breath and felt the weight of his past, the anger, the grief, the regret, lift from his shoulders. He was still the same man, but something fundamental had changed within him. He had found the stillness at the center of the storm. And in that stillness, he had found peace. If you found this story inspiring and want to dive deeper into the wisdom of Buddha and the teachings of mindfulness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By joining our community, you'll gain access to a wealth of knowledge that can help you navigate life with more peace and understanding. Let's embark on this journey of enlightenment together.